Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. I was standing in my kitchen wiping dried oatmeal off the table when the phone rang. I almost ignored it. My baby had cried all night. My head was pounding. My 4-year-old had refused breakfast again. At that moment, my biggest problem felt small and endless at the same time, like a gray fog I could not escape. I picked up the phone with my wrist still damp from the dishcloth, more out of reflex than intention. Camille Walker, I need you to listen carefully. That woman with your husband right now is not you. The voice was low, urgent, and so serious that my hands froze. For a second, I actually looked around my empty kitchen, as if there might be someone else standing there who could answer instead of me. My fingers tightened on the phone. A dull roar began behind my eyes. I leaned against the counter, suddenly unsure if my legs could hold me. I am sorry. Who is this? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady while my heart began to race so hard I could feel it in my throat. There was a soft inhale on the other end, like the caller was bracing herself before jumping. This is Tamika Brooks. I work at Harbor National Bank, downtown branch. You helped me years ago. You probably do not remember. But I did remember. 5 years earlier, I had quietly exposed her supervisor for stealing from clients. I had done the math, walked her through it, and stood beside her when she reported him. She kept her job. Since then, we had exchanged polite smiles whenever I came into the bank. Nothing more. No phone calls. No secrets. Until now. Your husband is here, Tamika said. He is in a private conference room. And the woman sitting next to him looks like you. She is wearing your coat, carrying your bag. She showed your identification. A dry, broken sound came out of my mouth before I realized it was supposed to be a laugh. That is impossible, I said. My husband is on a business trip. He left yesterday morning. There was a pause long enough to make my stomach tighten. Camille, she said quietly, I know you. I see you often. This is not you. Her words landed like stones. They are trying to move everything, she continued. Your accounts, your properties, every asset that has your name on it. And your mother is with them, signing as a witness. The room tilted. The dishcloth slid from my hand and hit the floor with a dull, wet slap. In that moment, I understood something I did not yet have language for. While I was busy surviving my life, someone else was actively stealing it. And I had no idea how close I was to losing everything. The kitchen blurred. The half-wiped table, the cereal boxes, the plastic cup on its side. All of it dimmed behind a single sharp thought. This is not a misunderstanding. This is an attack. Before I became the woman scrubbing oatmeal off a kitchen table at noon, I was someone else entirely. My name is Camille Walker, and I used to be a senior financial analyst in Houston. The kind who stayed late because I loved the work, not because I was afraid to go home. The kind who could look at a balance sheet and see what others missed. At the firm, they used to joke that I had X-ray vision. I could spot manipulation buried under clean numbers and confident signatures, the way some people could hear a single wrong note in an orchestra. I wore tailored suits and heels that clicked across marble floors. I walked into boardrooms without hesitation. When I spoke, people listened, not because I talked loudly, but because I was precise. I earned my own money, good money. I paid my own rent in a one-bedroom apartment with tall windows that looked out over the city. I chose my own life. I remember standing on that balcony one summer night, files in my lap, thinking, this is exactly who I wanted to be. Then I fell in love with Brandon Walker. He was charming in a way that made people lean in without realizing it. At a mutual friend's barbecue, he listened when I talked about work instead of changing the subject. You know how rare that is? He said, smiling. Someone who actually likes numbers. He told me I was brilliant, driven, impressive. That first year, he brought me coffee when I stayed late, texted me good luck before big presentations, sat in my tiny kitchen, and asked about my goals like they mattered as much as his. When I became pregnant with our first child, he said something that sounded loving at the time. We were sitting on the couch, my head on his shoulder, ultrasound photos spread on the coffee table. You do not need to push yourself so hard anymore, he said, kissing my hair. I have got us. Let me take care of everything. It felt like a warm blanket. I was tired, nauseated, overwhelmed. Letting someone else have us felt like relief. After our son was born, the conversation shifted. Late one night as we rocked our crying baby in the dim living room, Brandon said, "Why rush back? You have earned a break. Stay home a while. We will figure it out." He framed it like a gift, and I accepted it like one. I told my boss I would extend my leave. They were disappointed but supportive. "The door will be here when you are ready," my manager said. I believed him, and I believed myself when I said I would be back soon. After the second baby, our daughter, it became, why stress yourself? Daycare is expensive. You would just be working to pay strangers to raise our kids. I remember standing at the sink, bottle in one hand and phone in the other, listening as he broke down the numbers. "Look," he said, tapping a note on his screen. "By the time we pay for daycare, gas, and everything else, it barely makes sense." It did not sound unfair. It sounded rational. Brandon was good at sounding rational. After the third child, our youngest son, it turned into, "The kids need you more than the world needs another analyst." By then, the world he meant felt far away. Slowly, without a single dramatic moment, I disappeared. Not all at once, but piece by piece. My confidence softened. My work emails stopped coming. My suits stayed in the closet, pressed and waiting. My world shrank to nap schedules, grocery lists, pediatrician appointments, and surviving the day without crying on the kitchen floor. I told myself it was temporary, that I could always go back. I kept my business card tucked in a drawer, as if that small rectangle could anchor me to a life that was slipping away. But time has a way of turning pauses into habits and habits into cages. I did not lose my intelligence. I simply stopped being allowed to use it. And eventually, when you do not use something, you start to doubt whether you still have it. Brandon did not become controlling overnight. That is the part people rarely understand. If he had started by telling me what I could not do, I would have noticed. I would have argued. But he started by offering help, protection, comfort. One night, when the baby had been colicky for hours, he took my phone gently from my hand and said, "You have enough on your plate. Let me handle the finances. Bills, accounts, all of it. You should not be up late worrying about interest rates and statements." That is my lane now. At first, it was small things. He asked me to sign papers because he was busy. "Just some refinancing stuff," he would say, sliding the documents across the table between scattered crayons and sippy cups. "I summarized it for you. It is to lower our payments. You trust me, right?" I did. He was my husband, the father of my children. When I asked questions, he smiled and kissed my forehead. "You worry too much, Cam. You used to complain about stress. Let me carry it." When I mentioned going back to work after our second child started preschool, he frowned. We were at the dinner table, dishes pushed to the side, the kids chasing each other down the hallway. "Do you really want strangers raising our kids?" he asked quietly. "They are only little once. Money is not everything." The guilt hit me before I had words for it. I dropped the subject, telling myself I would revisit it in a year. A year turned into 2. 2 turned into 5. When friends invited me out, he sighed and studied my face like a doctor giving a diagnosis. "You look exhausted," he would say. "You never rest. Maybe next time. Stay home tonight. I will bring you something." At first he did, dessert from my favorite restaurant, flowers, a movie he thought I would like. Over time, the invitations stopped. People got tired of hearing, "Maybe next time," and "We will see." The decision stopped being mine. I stopped knowing where our money actually went. I stopped opening bank statements, partly because Brandon had them redirected, partly because I convinced myself I no longer needed to see them. I stopped feeling like I had a right to ask. Whenever I tried, he reminded me how much pressure he was under. "Everything I do is for this family," he would say, rubbing his temples. "You think I enjoy worrying about this stuff?" I believed him because believing him was easier than admitting something was wrong. By the time I realized I had no access to our finances, no recent work history, and no independent income, I was already too tired to fight. Exhaustion is a powerful tool. It makes you compliant. It makes you grateful for scraps of reassurance. It makes you doubt yourself even when you are right. I did not notice the cage being built around me because it was padded with comfort, routine, and trust. By the time I felt the bars, I was already inside. Looking back, the warning signs were there, bright as hazard lights, and I stepped around them because looking directly at them would have forced me to act. They were quiet, ordinary, easy to explain away if you wanted peace more than truth. My beige wool coat disappeared one afternoon. It was the one I wore to meetings when I still had them. The one Brandon always said made me look serious and sharp. I loved that coat. I searched the closet, the hall hooks, the back seat of the car. "We probably left it at the dry cleaner," he said when I mentioned it, barely looking up from his laptop. "I will check later." I believed him. Later never came. 2 weeks after that, my old handbag went missing. Inside were my driver's license, a couple of credit cards still in my name, and a business card from my former boss that I had never thrown away. I remember standing in the mudroom, staring at the empty hook where I always hung it. "You probably left it at the park," Brandon said. "You have been distracted lately." He sounded more amused than concerned. 2 days later, he put the bag on the counter. "Found it in the car," he said. The leather looked slightly scuffed, the lining a little torn. When I noticed that my driver's license photo looked subtly different, he laughed. "You are overthinking. You are exhausted. You said that yourself." My mother, Evelyn, started calling more often, her tone soft and probing. "Are you sleeping enough?" she asked. "Do you feel overwhelmed? Have you ever thought about taking a long break from everything?" I thought she was worried about me. I did not realize she was being fed a story. Once, when I hesitated, she said, "Brandon told me you have been talking about running away. Is that true?" I laughed it off, confused. "I have not said that," I told her. She changed the subject so quickly I did not have time to push. Brandon began making comments that stayed with me longer than they should have. Standing behind me in the mirror one evening, he said, "Have you looked at yourself lately? You used to care how you presented yourself." Another time, when I suggested a family dinner out, he shook his head. "Honestly, I am a little embarrassed to take you out like this. You are always in the same stretched t-shirts." I missed the woman who walked into a room and made people sit up. Each sentence landed softly, coded in the language of concern, but together they built something heavy inside me. I started avoiding mirrors. I started avoiding conversations that might expose how small my world had become. When something feels wrong but you are too tired to confront it, your mind reaches for the simplest explanation. You blame yourself. I told myself I was failing as a wife, as a mother, as a partner. I did not consider that someone else might be orchestrating that conclusion. It never crossed my mind that someone was preparing to replace me. Not in my marriage. Not in my own life. Ignoring the red flags felt safer than pulling on a thread that might unravel everything. So I stayed quiet. I cleaned, cooked, juggled, and told myself this was what sacrifice looked like. That silence almost cost me everything. On the day Tamika called, I left my children with our neighbor, Mrs. Howard, a retired teacher who lived across the hall. I must have looked worse than I realized because she caught my wrist before I ran down the stairs. "Camille, breathe," she said. "You are shaking." I pulled my hand free gently. "I will explain later," I told her. "I promise." I did not change my clothes. I did not fix my hair. I walked out the door in old jeans and a stretched t-shirt, my mind racing faster than my body could keep up. The drive downtown felt both too long and too short. Traffic lights blurred. I barely remember parking the car in a nearby garage, barely remember locking it. On the ride down the elevator, fragments of my old life began to surface. The analyst. The woman who asked questions. The one who never accepted vague answers when numbers did not add up. Somewhere under the exhaustion, she was still there, waiting. I called Tamika as soon as I stepped onto the sidewalk. "I am here," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, thin and too high. "I cannot go through the main entrance. They will see me." "There is a service entrance in the back," she replied. Her voice steadied me with its certainty. "Walk past the loading dock to the gray door. I will meet you there." 5 minutes later, I was following her up a narrow staff staircase that smelled like old coffee and cleaning supplies. Tamika looked different than she did behind the teller counter. Without the practiced smile, her face was tight with worry. "I knew something was wrong as soon as she handed me your identification," she said in a low voice as we climbed. "I see you in here every few months. You talk to your kids while you wait. You ask about details." This woman did not look at anything. She just signed like she was late for lunch. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure she could hear it. "How long have they been here?" I asked. "Almost 2 hours," she replied. "They are in conference room C. They said they needed privacy for major portfolio changes and property transfers. The manager approved it because your mother is there and the paperwork looks perfect." Her hand hovered near the railing like she wanted to reach for me and did not know if she should. She led me into a small security room filled with flickering monitors. The air was cool, the hum of machines steady and indifferent. On one of the larger screens, I saw my husband. Brandon sat at the head of the table, relaxed, confident, wearing a dark suit I had never seen before. He looked successful, untouched by sleepless nights or worry, like the man he used to be when he came to my office for lunch. Next to him sat a woman wearing my beige wool coat and holding my bag. Her hair was styled the way mine used to be before I stopped making hair appointments. From that angle, she looked like a version of me that had been frozen in time and polished. Across from them sat my mother, dressed neatly in a navy dress, focused, signing documents without hesitation. At the far end of the table was Brandon's sister, Rochelle, organized and efficient, stacking papers like someone very comfortable handling paperwork that did not belong to her. I felt something crack inside me. Not sadness. Clarity. This was not a mistake. This was not panic or confusion. This was a plan, deliberate and careful, and I had walked in just in time to see the final act. I did not cry. That surprised me. I stood there watching the monitors, and something inside me shifted into a familiar place, a quiet and focused one. The place I used to live in when a deal stopped making sense and everyone else in the room missed it. I turned to Tamika. I need transaction histories for every account in my name for the past 3 years and every power of attorney ever filed under my signature, I said. The words came out crisp, precise, like they always used to. She hesitated for half a second, glancing at the doorway, then nodded. I can do that, she said. Give me a few minutes. Her voice shook slightly, but her hands were steady. While she was gone, I watched Brandon lean toward the woman beside him. His hand rested on her back in a way I recognized instantly. It was not the touch of a colleague. It was not the touch of a stranger. It was the touch of habit, the unconscious, possessive gesture of a man who had grown used to claiming someone. The woman laughed at something he said, tipping her head in a way I recognized too. My stomach rolled. Tamika returned with a thick folder of printed statements and a pencil tucked behind her ear. She set the folder in front of me like it was an X-ray, like she already knew it would show broken bones. My hands moved automatically, circling numbers, drawing lines, connecting dates. Muscle memory took over. The exhaustion stepped aside to make room for the analyst. $10,000 here. $8,000 there. Small enough to avoid automatic alarms. Frequent enough to drain a life. Over $800,000 gone in a pattern so deliberate, it was almost elegant. All transferred to an LLC registered in Rochelle's name. 3 months earlier, a general power of attorney had been filed in my name authorizing the sale of our primary residence. I had never seen it. 1 month ago, a loan had been taken out using our vacation property on the Gulf Coast as collateral. I had never signed for it. 2 weeks ago, the beneficiary on my life insurance policy had been quietly changed from my children to my husband. My throat tightened, but my mind stayed sharp. Where was this power of attorney signed? I asked, pointing to one line that made my skin crawl. Tamika checked the system. Downtown branch, she said. According to the records, you were physically present. The security footage backs it up. The video showed a woman in my coat filmed from behind, signing documents at a side desk. She never turned toward the camera. The angle had been chosen carefully. That is not me, I said calmly. I was hospitalized that week. Complications after my youngest's flu. I can prove it. Tamika's face drained of color. This is fraud, she whispered. Multiple counts. This is not just a misunderstanding. This is federal. That is not all, I replied. I made one call to an old colleague, someone who still owed me a favor. When he answered, I kept my voice flat. I need everything you can legally tell me about Brandon Walker's company, I said. Current status, lawsuits, debt loads. I will not ask how you know it. He did not ask questions. 15 minutes later, he called back with what my instincts already suspected. Brandon's company was bankrupt, crushed by debt, lawsuits pending, creditors closing in from every direction. He had been hiding it for over a year. Suddenly everything made sense. The tightened jaw, the late nights he claimed were for strategy meetings. The way he reacted when I suggested we sit down together and review our finances for old times' sake. I was not his partner. I was his shield. When things were good, he was the success story. When things collapsed, everything had been shifted quietly into my name. And now he was emptying it all, preparing to leave me with the debt and nothing else. I stepped out of the security room because I needed air. The truth has weight. When it settles in your chest all at once, it becomes hard to breathe. The hallway outside the conference rooms was quiet, carpet muffling my steps. I found my mother in the women's restroom, standing in front of the mirror, touching up her lipstick with practiced precision. She looked calm, composed, like a woman helping her family with paperwork, nothing more. When she saw my reflection behind her, her hand froze. The lipstick shook slightly. "Camille," she whispered. "What are you doing here?" I looked at her for a long moment before answering, watching the way her eyes darted toward the door, as if she could still pretend this was normal. "What are you doing here, Mom?" I asked. My voice was quiet, but it carried. She straightened her shoulders in the way she always had when she wanted to look in control. "Brandon asked me to help," she said. "He said you were not well, that you were overwhelmed. He said you agreed to all of this, but were too fragile to handle the details." Her words were smooth, but her eyes betrayed the first flicker of doubt. "That woman in the conference room," I said quietly. "The one wearing my coat. That is not me. You know that." My mother looked away, focusing on her own reflection instead of mine. "You really do not remember?" she asked. "He showed me messages where you talked about leaving, about not coping anymore. You said you wanted to disappear for a while, that you needed him to handle everything, so you did not ruin the children's lives." "Those messages are fake," I replied. "I never wrote them. He needed you to believe I was unstable, so you would sign whatever he handed you. He needed a witness who looked respectable and trusted. That is you." She pressed her lips into a thin line, the gesture she used when she did not want to admit she might be wrong. "He said he was protecting the grandchildren," she murmured. "He said this was for the family, that you would thank him later." "Mom," I said, stepping closer. "He has been supporting his mistress for 3 years with my money. She is pregnant right now. He is trying to leave me with debt and take everything else. If you keep signing those papers, you are helping him do it." She shook her head slowly, denial fighting with the evidence in front of her. "That is not possible," she whispered. "Brandon would not." I took her hand and led her back to the security room. She followed stiffly, like someone being walked into a courtroom. On the screen, Brandon leaned toward the other woman and touched her cheek gently, intimately, without thinking. My mother's knees buckled. She sat down hard in the nearest chair. "He never looked at you like that," she whispered, eyes fixed on the screen. "I know," I said, "because I was never the one he loved. I was useful." Tamika placed the documents in front of my mother, transfers, deeds, dates, signatures. Proof lined up in black and white. My mother covered her mouth and began to cry, not dramatic sobs, but the quiet, shaking tears of someone watching a story they believed in fall apart frame by frame. "I believed him," she said. "I chose him over you. I thought I was doing what was best for the children. I did not want them to see you broken." The last word came out like it hurt. I sat beside her. For the first time in years, I saw shame in her eyes instead of criticism. "You can still fix this," I said. "But you have to tell the truth. Not what he told you. What you just saw." She wiped her face with the back of her hand and looked at me. "Tell me what to do," she said. There was no pride in it, no defensiveness, only a weary surrender. I took a breath. "You're going to walk into that room with me," I said. "You're going to tell the bank manager that you were misled. You're going to state clearly that you believed the woman in my coat was me because Brandon lied. And then you are going to cooperate with whatever investigation follows. No more covering for him. No more excuses." 20 minutes later, I stood outside the conference room door. Inside, Brandon thought he was winning. Tamika had called ahead and told them there was a minor verification issue, something about needing one more signature in person. Just enough to keep them seated. Just enough time for everything to be ready. Behind me stood Tamika, a bank security officer named Daniels, and my mother. She looked pale but steady now, like someone who had decided which side she was on. I caught my reflection in the glass panel beside the door. Old jeans. Wrinkled shirt. No makeup. Messy hair pulled into a loose knot. I did not look powerful. I looked like exactly what I was, a tired mother who had run out of time to pretend everything was fine. But I had the truth, documentation, and witnesses. That was enough. I opened the door. The room went silent. Brandon was standing by the window, phone in hand mid-sentence. When he saw me, the phone slipped from his fingers and hit the carpet with a dull thud. The sound was small but final. The woman in my coat, Raven Ellis, as I would later learn, jumped up so fast she knocked her chair backward. Without the calm posture, without the illusion of control, she looked young, frightened, and out of place. Rochelle clutched a folder of documents to her chest like a shield. The bank manager looked from me to the woman beside Brandon and back again, confusion spreading slowly across his face. "Brandon," I said calmly, my voice carrying clearly across the table. "How was your business trip?" The word hung in the air like smoke. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "Camille, this is not what it looks like," he said. His voice was breathless, almost offended, as if I had walked into the wrong rehearsal. I stepped forward and picked up a document from the table. "General power of attorney," I read aloud. "Authorization to sell my home. Authorization to liquidate my accounts." I looked up at him. "Would you like to explain why another woman is signing this in my name?" "It is temporary," he said quickly. "For the business. You know how things are. We needed to move some things around fast. You have been unwell. I was going to tell you when you were stronger." I heard my mother inhale sharply behind me. I did not look back. "I do know how things are," I replied. "You are bankrupt. Your company is under multiple lawsuits. You tried to shift everything into my name and then drain it. That is not protection. That is theft." The manager stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the carpet. "Sir," he said to Brandon, his voice tightening, "is this woman your wife?" Brandon pointed at Raven. "Yes," he said. "This is my wife. We have had a very stressful—" "No," I interrupted. "I am." I stepped forward so there was no mistaking it and turned to Raven. "Take off my coat," I said. She hesitated, eyes wide, darting from Brandon to the manager to the security officer in the doorway. "Raven," Brandon said, his voice low and warning. "Do not take off my coat," I repeated. The room held its breath. Slowly, she unbuttoned it and let it fall to the floor. Without it, the illusion collapsed. It was not a wife, not a partner, just a young woman in a simple black dress who had been dressed up to steal a life that was not hers. Everyone in the room could finally see it. The bank manager's jaw clenched. Tamika stepped forward and placed the folder of evidence on the table. My mother moved to stand beside me, shoulders squared, eyes fixed on Brandon. "I was misled," she said clearly. "I was told my daughter was unstable and agreed to all of this. That is not true. I have just seen proof of the fraud and the affair. I want to cooperate with whatever investigation follows." The police arrived quietly. No sirens. No shouting. Just two officers stepping into the room and asking Brandon to stand. For the first time since I met him, he looked small. As they read him his rights, he kept looking at me, searching my face for something he no longer had any claim to: mercy, doubt, regret. I gave him none. There was nothing left to give. Rochelle was taken next. She protested loudly, talking about lawyers and misunderstandings and just following instructions, but no one listened. The document spoke clearly enough. Raven stayed seated, shaking, hands clasped in her lap. Later she would testify that participating was her only way out of the financial trap Brandon had built around her too. At that moment, I felt nothing toward her. My anger had a single target. The next weeks blurred together. Statements, interviews, lawyers, court dates. Files stacked on my kitchen table where my children once colored. I met with a lawyer named Ms. Parker who listened without interrupting as I laid out every detail. From the missing coat to the hospital records to the security footage. "You are not just the victim here," she said finally. "You are also the key witness. Do not underestimate that." Brandon tried to negotiate from detention. Through his attorney, he offered a quiet divorce, full custody, and several properties if I would withdraw the charges. "He is worried about his reputation," Ms. Parker said dryly, sliding the proposal across her desk. I read it carefully and then pushed it back. "No," I said. "This is not revenge. This is accountability. He does not get to erase what he did because he is afraid now." The court moved faster than I expected. Fraud, forgery, financial abuse. The words felt heavy but accurate. During the trial, I sat in the witness box and answered questions for hours. Brandon's attorney tried to suggest I should have known, that my background in finance made my ignorance impossible. "You are an expert," he said. "Is it not true that you signed many documents without reading them?" I met his gaze. "I was a wife," I said. "It is true that I trusted my husband. That will not happen again." When the verdict was read, I felt nothing immediate. No rush of satisfaction. No triumphant joy. Just a strange emptiness where love had once lived. A quiet space that used to be filled with plans and compromises. The judge's words echoed, sentences, restitution orders, prohibitions on future financial control. Brandon glanced back at me once as they led him away. I held his gaze for a moment, then looked past him. Afterward, my mother stood beside me in the hallway outside the courtroom. The fluorescent lights were harsh, washing the color from her face. "I am sorry," she said. Her voice shook. "I chose wrong. I believed him when I should have believed you. I thought I was protecting you from yourself and from your own ambition. I did not see what he was doing. I nodded. You fixed it when it mattered, I said. It was not forgiveness, not completely. But it was a beginning, and right then, that was all I had to offer. I went home to my children that night and tucked them into bed one by one. My oldest son asked careful questions, his eyes too serious for his age. Is Dad coming back? He whispered. I sat on the edge of his bed and told him the truth in pieces he could hold. Not to live here, I said. He made choices that hurt a lot of people. There are consequences. But you are loved. That will not change. He nodded slowly and wrapped his arms around my waist. My youngest barely noticed. For him, bedtime was still about stuffed animals and nightlights. My daughter struggled the most. She missed her father and woke up crying for weeks, nightmares tangled with memories. We found help. A child therapist at a clinic nearby listened to her draw pictures and describe the day everyone got mad at Daddy. I sat in the corner of the room, hands clenched, forcing myself to stay quiet and let her speak. Everything was uncertain, but for the first time in years, it was honest. I sold the house we had lived in for years. Too many memories lived in those walls. Too many lies had been signed at the kitchen island. I bought a smaller townhouse in a quiet neighborhood outside Houston, close to my son's school and my daughter's daycare. Nothing fancy. Just safe. Just mine. The first night in the new place, the kids ran from room to room, their voices echoing in the empty spaces. This one is mine, my daughter said, spinning in a small bedroom with a single window. Can I put stars on the ceiling? We will see, I said, smiling despite the exhaustion. When they finally fell asleep on mattresses on the floor, I sat in the living room surrounded by unopened boxes and listened to the quiet. No footsteps pacing. No late-night phone calls behind closed doors. Just silence and the sound of my own breathing. 6 months later, I went back to work. My former boss, Mr. Ellis, called me himself. I heard what happened, he said. I am sorry for what you have been through. I also remember the way you used to dismantle bad deals in under 10 minutes. You were the best analyst we had. If you want back in, the door is open. I stared at the wall, children's artwork taped crookedly in front of me, and felt something inside me lift its head. We negotiated. I set conditions. Flexible hours. Time for my children. The option to work from home some days. Fair pay, not a favor. I am not who I was, I told him. I cannot pretend I do not have 3 kids and a complicated life. He chuckled softly. Neither can half the team, he said. Come as you are. Bring the brain we remember. We will figure out the rest. I agreed. On my first morning back, I stood in front of the mirror in a simple navy suit. My hair was pulled back, my makeup light. I did not recognize the woman staring back at me at first. Not the exhausted mother who counted minutes until nap time. Not the ambitious young professional who thought her career would always be linear. Someone else entirely. Someone who had been tested and was still standing. That evening, when I walked through the door with my work bag over my shoulder, my oldest son looked up from his homework and stared at me for a long moment. Mom, he said, you look like yourself again. I exhaled slowly. I am myself, I said. A new version maybe, but still me. He smiled and went back to his math problem, as if nothing monumental had just happened. I was not just rebuilding a career. I was rebuilding a life slowly, honestly, on my own terms. I learned how to set up automatic alerts on my accounts, how to lock down my credit, how to document everything. I taught my children in age-appropriate ways what it meant to ask questions, to trust but verify, to know where the money went. I sat down with my mother at my small kitchen table and walked her through her own accounts, making sure no one would ever be able to quietly move her life around again. People sometimes ask me, in hushed voices over coffee or after they share their own stories, how it feels to win. They expect anger, celebration, satisfaction. They wait for me to describe the moment the verdict was read or the look on Brandon's face when the officers reached for his wrists. But that was never the point for me. The real turning point was quieter. A tired woman in old jeans walking through a side door of a bank and deciding not to fold. I did not destroy my husband. He destroyed himself, one choice at a time. All I did was refuse to disappear quietly. I chose to drag the truth into the light, even when it meant admitting how long I had lived in the dark. Now, when I lock the door of my small townhouse at night, when I sign my own documents, when I check my own balances, the feeling that comes is not triumph. It is something steadier. It is the knowledge that every decision made in this life of mine is made by me. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.